Am I the a-hole for getting mad at a coworker for refusing to use my name? So I recently started a new job. Now, don't get me wrong, I like my coworkers. Apart from some drama that started previous to me joining, they all seem to be lovely, inclusive people. We work long shifts, 13 hours, on our feet the whole time, so I feel like this could have contributed to my crankiness and perhaps misplaced anger at the situation. For context, I'm non-binary, and although I haven't legally changed my name, it's in the works, I've only gone by Rin. The only people who know my dead name on site are my supervisor and my manager. My name is one that I spent a long time choosing and has meaning to me, so I feel like I'm justified in wanting people to use it, not necessarily more so than people who go by their birth name, but justified nonetheless. One of my coworkers, S, late 20s male, deliberately mispronounces it. Not with malicious intentions, but because it makes other people laugh. I laughed initially, but when I tried to correct him, he was pronouncing it Ren instead of Rin. He laughed at me and told me that it was no big deal, and that his accent makes it hard. However, although English isn't his first language, he doesn't have much of an accent at all, and has no problem pronouncing seemingly anything else. His compromise was simply to call me R. Now, R isn't bad. I didn't mind it at first, but coming out at work was a big deal to me, and I feel kind of disrespected every time he calls me that. Usually, I wouldn't consider myself to be the a-hole in this situation, but yesterday he called me R, and it was the last hour of my shift. I was tired and ready to go home, and I said my name is Rin, not R, not Ren, Rin. It's not difficult to say, get over yourself. I'm sick of asking you. If your accent makes it hard, then bloody practice. Now, the reason I'm asking today is that I've been getting weird looks, and the atmosphere is wrong. I feel like I overreacted and thus tainted the way my coworkers see me. I don't want the next 4 months to be awkward since I work here full time. Am I the a-hole? Edit. Some people have pointed out that I initially didn't mind R as a compromise, but S and I would go back and forth each morning between Rin and Ren or R. Although to be fair, it could have come off in a joking manner since I'm not a very confrontational person. I understand you're not a very confrontational person, but you created conflict here and confrontation that I feel like was unnecessary. You gave the green light to him calling you R, and you blew up anyway. If you're going back and forth between Rin, Ren, and R, I understand that, but to me, I'm not getting a sense of you gave him fair warning that you were going to burst out like this at him. This went from 0 to 100 really quick, and while I agree there's some justification for your annoyance here, I think you went too far. You went too far into the red zone. If I was a fly on the wall in this instance and I was watching you, as a coworker, I'd be like, Jesus, what the hell is going on over there? Gonna stay away from that. No, thank you. And because of my gut feeling to this situation, I feel like you're the a-hole for this one. Now in the comments, CorkyPig888 says, you're the a-hole. You implied that R was an acceptable nickname to Rin, then snapped at someone for using it and culture shamed them because obviously practice is the immediate solution for learning how to pronounce a lesser common name in a new language. You should get over your own self. My workplace requires only legal names be used. Be thankful that you have an inclusive workplace. I agree that seeing R is okay and then getting mad about it is an a-hole move because coworker can't know that it suddenly is not okay anymore. A better way to handle this would be, hey, I understand it's very difficult for you, but it's my name, and I would appreciate it if you could try to get it right. Quote, obviously practice is the immediate solution for learning how to pronounce a less common name in a new language. However, if not continued practice, then what is the solution to learning how to pronounce the name right? Waiting for a miracle? It doesn't seem like the coworker is trying to improve at all, which is also an issue. I agree, but the insinuation and demand that a non-language native speaker learn his new name for his own feelings is in itself selfish. If somebody can't pronounce a name, then they can't pronounce it. My parents have difficulty with some specific sounds in English. 20 years learning the language, 100% fluent, trilingual, some words still don't come out perfectly. Demanding English perfection or perfect pronunciation from an immigrant or non-English speaker is borderline xenophobic. Box 246 says, "You're the a-hole." As someone who has always had problems with their name mispronounced and misspelled, just get over it. From what you posted, they're not insulting you being non-binary. They're just mispronouncing a name, which happens. I had a manager that I worked under for years. No matter how many times I corrected her or anyone else corrected her, she still got it wrong. I didn't blow up at her because it's not a big deal. Hell, I respond to freak stick if my boyfriend calls me that, which is often. Stop making mountains out of molehills. And Livid Let Die says, "You're the a-hole because he did stop when you asked and compromised with R. Then you flipped and suddenly decided, without further conversation, that he was disrespecting you. Telling someone to get over themselves and practice your name when they've explained their accent is a problem is just a bad look on you. You don't know what words he does and does not struggle with. Just because he doesn't seem to have a problem to you, doesn't mean he doesn't struggle. If I was any of your co-workers, I'd think you're an asshole to this guy and wouldn't want to engage with you." And back to the post, OP offers an update and says, "After my shift ended, I talked to S and apologized for my outburst. Thanks to a lot of people educating me on how, even though S has no accent, some pronunciations can be more difficult, I told him that it was unfair of me to lash out like that, and that I'm young and still an adult and should be more in control of how I react to things. He told me that it was okay and he shouldn't have poked fun, and did end up saying that he had noticed I looked uncomfortable, but since I never said anything, he didn't think that it was too much of a big deal to me. He also said he would make a conscientious effort to pronounce my name correctly, after I explained how it meant a little more than it might to someone who goes by their birth name. Thank you for everyone who responded. I recognize that it was wrong for me to immediately assume that he was trying to be funny, instead of simply his inability to pronounce my name. Turns out that it was a little bit of both." And our next post is by user Eggs Benedict T, titled, "Would I be the a-hole for not wanting my roommate's kid at my house?" So I, 30 female, have a roommate, 22 male, who has a 3-year-old son. I live in a 1,100 square foot condo in downtown Phoenix, Arizona that I've owned for the past 2 years. I solely own the condo and have put 40 to 50k into fixing it up and remodeling every surface of it. I also did most of the labor myself as well. Now, for some backstory, I don't have kids and I don't think I want kids, because I think it's a great responsibility and don't have the time to truly dedicate to it at the moment. I'm building my career still. If I do decide to have kids, I would put all the effort needed to have a good kid and be a good parent. I'm also not ready to give up my quiet and very clean lifestyle just yet. I would also want a bigger place if I have kids. Now the issue. My roommate's been living at my place now for about 6 months. We are somewhat friends, but mainly just roommates. He's close with my boyfriend though. He moved in after living at my boyfriend's place for about 8 months, so we've all lived together for a little over a year. The roommate is young and doesn't have a great job, so I gave him a discount on rent, at around $600 a month total, just to help him out. I wouldn't have a roommate at this point if he honestly didn't need the help. He may not be fully aware that I'm giving him a deal, but knows my last roommate paid $900 a month plus utilities. The location is prime and it's fully remodeled and updated. He has a son that lives with his mum full-time, about 3 to 4 hours away. He sees his son on occasion, but nothing too consistent due to money reasons, so he claims. He understands that I'm not wanting a kid here often or at all, considering it's a small place and I like my space to be quiet and clean. And to be blunt, if his kid destroyed anything, he couldn't afford to fix it. The past 2 weekends, he's had his kid stay here. Now, before I sound like the a-hole, hear me out. This kid's not just a 3-year-old, but a 3-year-old with negligent parents. He swears, cannot count to 0, has 0 structure, doesn't really talk, and gets into things he knows he shouldn't, like grabs all the remotes and moves them out of place. It's obvious the mother doesn't do her job as the parent, and my roommate isn't much better. Please just trust my judgment on this. I don't want to get lost in the weeds here. I do feel bad for the kid, But my days off, having a 3-year-old running around my house, is not what I thought I was getting into. Edit to add, in the over a year living together, this is the first time we've met his kid, or his kid has stayed with us. They always stayed at his aunt's or dad's house for the weekends. Would I be the asshole if I asked my roommate to not bring his son here anymore to stay, or not to make a habit of it at least? If his kid was well behaved, or even if my roommate actually took him out to do something fun besides be inside expected to sit still all day, I think I could grit my teeth and deal with it. But his parenting really drives me up a wall, and if I wanted kids around at home, I would legit just have a kid. Would I be the asshole for requesting my condo as a kid-free place, except on rare occasions? I feel I need to say something now before it becomes a habit. Edit, further information, I've lived with him for 6 months prior to him living here as well. He was originally my boyfriend's roommate. He never brought his kid there or here in the 1 year that he lived with us, always his uncle or dad's house. He's also only gone to see his kid maybe 10 times in a year, which is his choice. We discussed it on the front end before he moved in, and he said that he wouldn't be bringing his son here. Nothing in writing. He didn't mention to me that he was planning to bring his kid over to stay this current weekend. He kinda just surprised us with it. There's been no discussion on his part regarding how often this will occur now. Mind you, we went from his kid never being here the past little over a year to now the past 2 weekends with no real notice. More clarification, when his son is here, my roommate sits in his room most of the weekend. He doesn't take his kid to the park or really try to play or hang out with him. Legit, he just keeps a 3-year-old he never sees locked in his room with him or lets him roam around the house. Edit, my roommate's kid just broke the glass ball on my ceiling fan. He was jumping on my roommate's bed messing with the chains and ended up hitting it off place and the ball fell and broke. My roommate, I assume, was just sitting on his phone in the room while this happened. He was in the room with him. I heard the kid jump around for at least 5 minutes until I heard the glass break from the other room. I think not allowing your roommate's kid to stay with you on occasion, yeah, it might make you the a-hole, but it's your house, your rules. You should go get it in writing that he doesn't bring the kid here unless under extraneous circumstances, or he leaves. That's the best case scenario here. You're already giving him such a good deal, $600 a month as opposed to 900 plus utilities, that he needs to respect that. And obviously he has no respect for you. He needs to learn his actions have consequences in this situation, and he needs to stand up, mature a little bit more, and actually be a parent that isn't negligent. It's sad that these things have to happen and continue to happen in this world, and I would like to see a stop put to it, but like, what can you do? At this point, this problem's just going to continue if you don't do anything about it. So I'd say not the a-hole for this one. I don't blame you. Now in the comments, Kralurk says, not the a-hole, but the best solution would be to find another roommate. Everything else will not work out. And OP replies, yeah, I'm realizing that now. I genuinely just wanted to help this person and give him affordable rent in this insanely expensive economy. Look, I'm the same as you. However, boundaries and rules clearly need to be set. I see a lot of commenters talking as if you're just a landlord. But this is your living space too, and you paid a lot of money to make it your home. You have to consider your own well-being. And OP replies, thank you, I'm realizing this now. Doohickey replies to that, the thought keeps crossing my mind that the kid would be better served if you also confronted your roommate about why you're making this rule. I'd point out that it wouldn't be happening if he parented his child. 3-year-olds' minds are really active, so that kid is basically being stunted in his development by lack of structure, stimulation, and apparently affection too. You're not the a-hole, but man do I feel for that kid. Not that you should feel obligated in any way to parent him. And OP replies, I totally feel for the kid. I actually think my disappointment in the roommate's poor parenting is a big factor in my emotional thought process about this. I don't have kids, so who am I to give advice on how to be a better parent? I feel that's not my place. Maybe that's why I originally went the extreme route of the kid not being here. I feel super bad for his son. Litho Giraffe says, he didn't bring his kid over to your boyfriend's apartment for a year, but then suddenly he's bringing his kid to yours. I wonder if the roommate thought that having a female roommate, that she would take care of the kid. He doesn't sound like a very diligent father. Has he been trying to use you as the babysitter? And OP replies, yeah, legit, in the 1 year, the last 2 weekends was the first time ever. I finally just met his kid after living together for a year. I added that clarification in the post. Like, he doesn't expect me to babysit, but when his kid gets into crap, I'm the one telling him no, don't do that. You are conflating two issues here and not addressing one of them. You do not want the child around, the child is neglected. To the first point, you're a landlord. Your tenant, whether a friend or not, has a legal right to private enjoyment of the property. Where I am, you can't prevent them from having guests, including their child, as long as the guest isn't staying long-term enough to be considered living there or breaking the law in some way. You can't control your tenants' lives. The second issue is that a child is currently being neglected, and that's why you have issues with them. If you're upset because he leaves the child unsupervised alone all day, and the mother isn't parenting well either, call CPS. This is neglect. You can't just leave 3-year-olds to fend for themselves. And OP replies, to address your first question/point, I live here also. He's renting the other room where I also live. If his kid is now going to be here every other weekend, that's an adjustment for me. I'm okay making the adjustment with boundaries. I just would have preferred that he talked with me about it first. I'm realizing I'm not frustrated from a landlord's perspective, I'm frustrated from a roommate perspective. If I didn't live here also, of course, you do you, but this does affect my living situation having a kid here. My boyfriend and I smoke weed, we do have adult friends over on occasion, I swear, etc. It's just not currently my idea of a kid-friendly household. I'd have to make adjustments to accommodate a kid being here. Second point, he's here. He just doesn't really pay much attention to him. Like, he'll be chilling in his room most of the day while his son is being a bored 3-year-old. He's not leaving the kid unsupervised, he just isn't really trying to do anything with his kid either. Does that make sense? The mum situation, I don't know anything more than what he's told me, and he doesn't like her, so I'm not sure how true or not true those statements have been. My sister has a 1.5-year-old son. Ever since he was born, she's tried to get my 14-year-old daughter to babysit, as she wants them to be close, even though they're so far apart in age. My daughter has declined as she doesn't want the responsibility of someone else's kid, especially if something were to go wrong. My sister doesn't get it, despite multiple people, myself and my daughter included, telling her. Yesterday, we were at our parents' house for a barbecue. It was mostly adults with a few children varying in ages, but my nephew was the youngest. All throughout the barbecue, my sister kept trying to get my daughter to hold him or feed him, which my daughter declined. At one point, I went in the house to help my aunt and mum with drinks and sides. 15 minutes later, I hear my sister shrieking. I rush outside and she's holding her baby, whose face is bleeding. Her husband is nearby, trying to take the baby to administer first aid. My sister is shrieking at my daughter to put her damn phone down, and you're in a lot of trouble. My daughter looks terrified. Finally, brother-in-law takes the baby and goes to tend to him. I get both sides. My sister went inside to pee, asking my daughter to watch her son. My daughter said no, ask your husband. My sister says she told her to just help out and it won't kill you. My daughter flat out told her no, and my sister left, knowing that my daughter was looking at her phone. The yard was filled with adults, all of whom they were keeping an eye on the little one, but at some point, they lost track. My parents have concrete steps leading to their backyard. Somehow, nephew tried to walk up them, tripped and scratched his face. He was fine in the end, just a few scrapes. My sister kept demanding I take my daughter's phone and asked what I'd do to punish her. I said nothing because she said she wasn't watching her cousin and there were half a dozen adults who should have been watching him, specifically his father. Brother-in-law even admits that it's on him and he screwed up, but my sister kept blaming my daughter. We left right then, and I told my daughter several times in front of the family and alone that it's not her fault. My sister's still mad at me, and my mum says that I should have my daughter apologize. I said no, she did nothing wrong. My mum says that it wouldn't have killed my daughter to watch him for 2 seconds. Am I being an ass? I don't get her fascination with wanting to force your daughter to look after it when it's actually her father's fault. I get that it's no big deal, and people normally would be like, yeah, fine, I'll look after the kid for 2 seconds, just be back quick. That's a normal societal expectation. That's something that I would do. And I get that you don't have to do it. And a lot of the times you're a dick for not doing these things. So this is a hard judgment in some respects. If I knew the kid was going to hurt himself beforehand, and that he was prone to being clumsy and scratching his face, going upstairs, doing stupid stuff like that, and I intentionally was like, no, if the baby gets hurt, that's his fault. You're the mum, you're the dad, you should be looking after him. Maybe I would feel bad with the knowledge beforehand. But really, to me, this boils down to a failure on the dad's part. OP is morally and legally in the right in this situation. They didn't have to do it, they shouldn't be expected to do it, it's not wrong that they didn't do it. Because it's not their job, and it shouldn't be their job. Plain and simple. Father messed up, father should admit to that, and they both should come together to apologize to OP and OP's daughter. So no, OP, you're not being an ass. Now in the comments, Kara in a pickle says, not the a-hole. The child's father was right there. He can look after the child. Your daughter said no, your sister chose to ignore her, it is your sister's fault. I love that the dad, the sister's husband, is like, nah, it was my fault, even though it seems like the mum, sister, didn't even tell him. Either way, it's definitely not your daughter's fault, not the a-hole. And this seems like some sexist gender norms bullcrap if you ask me. Holy frickin' Nugget says, not the a-hole, and good for you for standing up for your daughter. Really happy that your nephew is okay? It really sounds like sister-in-law was trying to force your daughter into doing something that she was uncomfortable with. Daughter had already repeatedly said no. One of her reasons being, what if something bad happens? And guess what? She was proven right. No, it would not have killed her to keep an eye out, but it was also not her responsibility. The other zebra replies, it sounds to me like sister-in-law is hoping OP's daughter takes a liking to the toddler, and that's why she keeps trying to get her to hold or feed him. Seems like sister-in-law hopes that she can get free babysitting for date nights or something. Since that isn't working, she's resorting to guilt trips and boundary pushing. OP's daughter said no, sister-in-law is trying to negate her refusal and make her responsible anyways. If OP or their daughter apologize now, sister-in-law will probably keep pushing. I got pushed into a lot of babysitting as a teen and preteen. My parents would make me even when I didn't want to, but they did insist that I was paid for it. I did have a few relatives try something like that, trying to get me to bond with the kids so they could invite me over to play with the baby when they really meant free babysitting. My parents had my back on that much, at least. OP, don't back down. It's a big not the a-hole from me. Mountain Goat 05 says, not the a-hole. Your daughter has been very clear that she doesn't want to babysit. I think it's awesome that you're backing her up and advocating for her. Your sister is a huge a-hole for not taking no for an answer. OP should tell her sister and mother that she's actually rewarding her daughter for being mature enough to know that she does not want the responsibility of watching someone else's child, and that she was able to clearly state that she was not accepting the responsibility. I love this. I hope you don't mind, but I'd like to add to it. OP, let them know that you're rewarding her for successfully voicing her personal boundaries, despite being harassed by multiple adults. Tell them how proud you are that she was able to give such a firm no, especially given how much young women can be pressured to do as they are told. Let them know you taught her to be strong in character, and that you couldn't be happier with her resolve. By the way, OP, I love the way you're respecting your daughter's choices here. Our next post is by user Can't With Her, titled, Am I the a-hole for still not letting my sister into my house after she made me miss my daughter's birth? Frankly, I don't know if I'm being an a-hole. Family seems to think I am, so I just want to know what the others think here. My sister, 25 female, was going to meet her dad. Not my dad, by the way, for the first time in almost 18 to 19 years, and she was really nervous. She asked me to go with her for support. He was staying at some hotel about 30 minutes away, and the whole ride over there, my sister had my phone to give me directions. My wife was calling me because she'd gone into labor. Then my mother-in-law was calling me too. My sister put my phone on Do Not Disturb without me knowing and erased the notifications. I didn't even realize it until after we were leaving from having lunch with him an hour and a half later that she had been calling me. All my sister told me was that I had a missed call, more like dozens. When I found out, I was yelling at her the whole ride to the hospital. She apologized many times. Her only excuse was this was a big emotional moment for her meeting her dad, and she was scared doing it alone, knowing how her anxiety is. This was the only time they'd have to see each other since he was leaving in a few days and wouldn't be back for months. I really couldn't believe it. By the time we got there, my daughter had already been born a half hour. Don't get me wrong, I was so happy to know my daughter and wife were okay, but I was also devastated to have missed the birth of my first child. I couldn't look at my sister. All I told her was to get an Uber to take her home because I didn't want her near me right now. My daughter is almost 4 weeks old, and almost everyone, vaccinated, has come to see her. Last weekend, my parents came over with my sister in the car, but I said I don't want her in my home right now. They got mad and left early. I keep hearing it from my family that I'm being completely unfair, treating my sister like an outcast by not letting her in my home. But I'm just still angry at her right now, and I don't think I have it in me to be in her presence. Am I the a-hole? Now in the comments, well fudge it says, not the a-hole. She knew exactly what she was doing. She made you miss something once in a lifetime, and I can't imagine how important that must have been for you. And the fact that she did it to go see her deadbeat father? That's tragic and ironic, and your parents can't even see it your way a little, it seems. You have every right to be furious. And OP replies, her defense was, she thought my wife would have been in labor for hours, or at least hoped she would be in labor long enough for us to do both. I am so furious. And it never occurred to her that you would want to be with your wife during labor? She's just trying to make excuses for her awful behavior, not the a-hole. I think OP should ask his family how he's supposed to feel if something had gone wrong and he was sat at lunch somewhere. Thank goodness that it sounds like the birth was quick and straightforward, but it could so easily not have happened like that. It sounds like the family needs to stop and take a moment to actually think through the gravity of what happened before demanding that OP just move on because family. Also, ask his mum how she would have felt being in labor, knowing her husband was driving and not being able to get a hold of him for hours, despite usually being able to. I'm sure his wife was going through a lot of emotions on top of all the birth-related things. And Trape75 says, not the a-hole. You know what else is a big emotional moment? The birth of your child. She didn't have the right to prioritize meeting her dad over you being present for a huge moment in your life. You can choose how you respond to that. They don't get to manage how you feel. A moment that OP could only go through one time. The sister's dad wouldn't be back for months, sure, but he'd be back at some point, and she could see him then. OP can't be there to see the birth of his first child twice. Our next post is by user Throwaway Man Feels, titled, would I be the a-hole if I used my coverage under my religious parents' insurance to start transitioning without telling them? Hey Reddit, I'm at an impasse. I'm female to male, and my parents are pretty much complete opposites. I'm an atheist trans man, and they're conservative religious fundamentalists. So far, we've been able to carve out a small balance where we coexist by mostly ignoring, well, me. Despite the fact that they already know that I'm trans, they refuse to even acknowledge it, which is probably for the best, because they are very much against trans and gay people. Which brings me to the conundrum. I want to start hormone replacement therapy. I have the insurance for it. My parents would never let me transition at any point in my life, but my insurance is from my dad's job. They want me to be on it and want to cover me for as long as they can. My parents are extremely strict about the ways that their money and support are used. I can't even get non-kosher foods when we go out to eat at restaurants. So if I told them that I was considering medical transition, they would absolutely pull me from their insurance, or at least not renew it. Hell, they'd probably cut me out again. They've done it over less. Which means if I wanted to use the insurance for hormone replacement therapy, it'd have to be in secret. And from my perspective, I don't really think I'm an a-hole. It's just a prescription. That's what medical insurance is for. But the moment my parents find out that I started hormone replacement therapy, our entire family would be ripped apart. And I guess that's really what I'm afraid I'm the bad guy in. They'd be furious that I used their insurance and that I was actually transitioning and that I had violated their values and betrayed their trust. I doubt they'd speak to me again. God, they'd be so upset and so angry. I'm not sure I can even find the words to express the depth of it. And it is their insurance. Would I be the a-hole? Definitely in their eyes, you'd be the a-hole, and I don't think you can change that opinion. I feel like that one is set in stone, and it's just an unfortunate reality of life. To them, you would be ruining their daughter. To them, you'd be ruining your entire family, and they would feel angry and betrayed. And then they'd be like, oh, you're so cowardly to do this in secret. But it's like, they leave you no other choice by the sounds of it. I don't feel like they're going to be rational actors in this instance. From the outside in, morally, you're in the clear for this one. I just don't know if it's a good idea to try and do this while on their insurance. There seems like a good chance of being caught, and if you are caught, have you got backup plans for the fallout and for your own health? That's always a concern here. So not the a-hole, but I would give this one some time to really, flesh out a plan. Now in the comments, Critical Success 520 says, do not do this. If they find out in the middle of transition and cut you off the insurance, to put it bluntly, you are screwed, and it will screw up your health. Wait until you have your own financial means. This can go so badly. True. I was under my father's insurance when I started taking antidepressants, and the insurance sent him a whole packet on living with your depression. It wasn't a problem because my parents are chill, but it was a conversation I would have preferred to have on my own time. OP, just another thing for you to consider. You would not be the a-hole, but please consider your well-being above all else here. People can access what bills their health insurance covers. If they find out and remove you, how does that affect your health if you're still transitioning? Would you be able to get your own coverage without missing necessary appointments and prescription refills? Think it through all the way before deciding. Yaboku God X says, you're the a-hole. It's their insurance and they will find out through their monthly statements or log in to see their dependents. If you really want to transition, you should seek out a job with benefits or start saving up. This will backfire and it will not be pretty. Also, you know they're strict and have basically laid out rules for you. It would be nearly impossible to keep this as a secret, and when they find out, you will be liable for this 100%. It seems like you don't have the financial means for this yet, and you will be on the hook for this. Do it when it's your own insurance, so they can't have a say or a leg to stand on. And the next post is by user AfraidFig2738, titled, Am I the a-hole for requiring my son and his wife sign a contract before I give the stepchildren college money? So I, 56 male, have 3 children. Sam, 32 male, Eve, 30 female, and Amy, 28 female. Sam and Eve are married with children, and my wife and I started college funds for them that we put money in at least twice a year. Sam married a woman, Jane, 36 female, who already had 2 children from a previous relationship, and we have to accept them as a part of the family once they proved that they were serious. My wife and I invite them over, give them presents, attend after-school activities, occasionally babysit, and don't mind that they call us grandpa and grandma. During our first in-person family get-together since the pandemic, my wife and our children and their children over along with my sister-in-law and her family. It was especially nice because this was the first time that we were meeting sister-in-law's first grandchild, a sweet baby girl who was 8 months old. The topic of saving up for college came up, and my wife casually mentioned about how we started up college funds for all 3 grandchildren. Sam's wife overheard and walked in laughing to say, "You mean 5? Not wanting to cause any future problems through miscommunication, I corrected and explained things to Jane. She didn't seem upset at the time, but after everyone had left, Sam called and said how upset he and Jane were that we didn't start up funds for Sam's stepchildren. I told him that it was our money and we could do whatever we wanted with it, and to think of it as a way to focus any money that they would have put towards his biological child to just give to the stepchildren. I thought that my reasoning was logical, and thought that my son agreed when he stopped talking about it. Again, we were called about the lack of funding for the stepchildren, and Jane wanted to know why we weren't treating them equally. I calmly explained that in almost every other way, we do treat the kids like our grandchildren. But their ties to us are only through marriage, and if Sam and Jane were to divorce, then they may not be our grandchildren anymore. Jane was really hurt by this, and asked me if that meant that their kids wouldn't inherit anything once my wife and I were gone. I felt very offended because that was a personal question, but answered yes. If Jane and Sam were still married by the time we died, her kids would get something. But if she wanted it to be an equal share and us to start a college fund for the first 2 kids, then she and Sam would need to sign an agreement stating that they would never divorce. Jane got offended, and I asked her why if she does truly love my son and never intends to divorce him. My other children agree that signing an agreement wouldn't be a big deal, but Sam is upset too. Am I the a-hole? Edit to add because I know this might come up. I'm aware that blood ties aren't always what make people family, and as far as I know, Sam hasn't legally adopted Jane's first 2 children. Also, when the college funds were mentioned, we were out of earshot from all the children, so the only way Jane would find out is if an adult told them. Edit to add 2. 1, because I keep seeing this, no, the agreements wouldn't be to keep them from getting a divorce. That's ridiculous. It would be in regards to both my son and Jane paying back any of the college fund money that the stepkids use. 2. Yes, my wife and I are more well off than Jane's parents, so if they're starting a college fund, I don't expect it to be as much as we would contribute. And 3. No, I don't know about the stepkids' biological paternal side, as they live elsewhere, and my wife and I have no reason to be in communication with them. I can only ever think of one time that I've actually seen them in person. And edit to add 3, another one because I'm still getting the same thing, so I'll explain my reasoning a bit more. No matter what happens with my children's marriages, their children will always be my grandchildren from both a legal and biological standpoint. The same can't be said for Jane's kids, because what happens if her and my son divorce and each of them remarry? Am I supposed to still give her first 2 children an equal amount as everyone else? Also, what if Sam marries another woman with kids, and I'm expected to be just as financially responsible for them as the others? Where does this end? Also, that means that there will be less money all around, and I don't want to do that. You've honestly done a really good job defending your case, so I'm going to rule in favor of your OP. I can't find many faults in that logic or any at all, and that comes from my bias because I agree with you. This Jane character really wants her cake and to eat it too. No, you can't have that. That's not how life works. Pretty funny how much of a spotlight was shone on her and how she was revealed when asked about a contract saying, yeah, as long as you're married, the kids can have it. So just don't divorce, okay? You're not going to divorce my son, are you? And she's like, I can't guarantee that. But I love him. We're going to be married forever, yeah? Obviously, I would hope you can't contractually force someone to be married forever. There are ways to get out of marriages, I understand that, but, you know, this contract seems a bit illogical, but really it's saving OP's ass at the end of the day. I'm surprised OP is still willing to actually start a college fund for them. Unless I formed a really good relationship with her and the kids, me personally, I would just tell her no, point blank. It's my money, I do with it as I please. So go off, OP. I'm proud that you're able to be that generous and that giving with your time and money. If she's not going to sign the contract, too bad, so sad, I say. Not the a-hole, OP. Now in the comments, Kara18455 says, not the a-hole. My aunts and uncles went through a number of marriages when I was a kid, often with stepchildren. Despite how much the then married couples claimed their love was forever, the majority of those marriages didn't last until the kids reached adulthood, much less finished college. When it comes to people I'm only connected to via someone else's marriage, I'm aware that I may not be connected to them for long. I agree. The son and wife have every right to feel the way they do, but this grandparent also has every right to save and use their money on what they feel is the best thing. I wouldn't expect my step-parents or their parents to save money for me, even though I came into their life when I was young. Yes, they treat me like grandchildren, but I know that if my parents and step-parents were to divorce, it'd cause a shift in our relationship with the extended family. I don't think OP is the a-hole. Clausabel says, not the a-hole. The people saying you're the a-hole have obviously not been in a step-kid situation from the parents and grandparents' side, and they're whining over acceptance and tolerance, which this isn't about. OP obviously accepts his step-grandchildren and treats them well. The only thing he's doing in this situation is protecting himself and his wife from hurt and financial loss down the line. He's completely correct that if his son and daughter-in-law were to divorce, the step-grandkids won't be his grandkids anymore. Everyone wants to pretend that won't happen, or he'd still see the kids if they did divorce, but realistically, when a couple divorces and there aren't blood ties, it's unlikely that pre-blended families see each other anymore. That's the practical reality, as un-PC as it seems. There is absolutely nothing wrong with OP wanting reassurance that if his son and daughter-in-law were to divorce, and he loses his grandchildren, that the money will be paid back. I think daughter-in-law is using college funds as a cover for, you don't really accept my kids, when in reality, she feels entitled to the money, especially given her tactless comments about inheritance and OP's comments about her kids not getting money from the other side of the daughter-in-law's family. She sucks. Am I the a-hole for saying it's weird that my siblings are getting married? Okay, so this is a throwaway account for obvious reasons. These are also my half-siblings. So my 24 female, half-sister, 21 female on my mum's side, and my half-brother, 22 male on my dad's side, are getting married in December. Both of my parents have been supportive but awkward about it. My mum took my sister dress shopping on Saturday, and I stayed at my brother's house to have lunch with him and my dad. We started talking about the wedding, and I randomly blurted out something along the lines of, "This is so weird." And when asked what I meant, I stated that my siblings were about to marry each other, and tried to crack a joke about indirect incest. This did not go over well. My brother called me a tramp, and said that I was unnecessarily making things weird. My dad stayed silent. I immediately defended myself, saying that technically, that's exactly what it is, and that it is an awkward situation. I tried to get my dad to chime in, but he refused to stand up for either of us. My brother asked me to leave, and later that day, I got a call from my sister, saying that if I couldn't be supportive and happy for them, then I shouldn't bother even coming to the wedding. I feel like this was all blown out of proportion. Am I the a-hole? Edit. I'm banned for 3 days, so I can't respond to anyone. 1. Yes, we were all legitimately raised together, just within 2 separate households. But since we were in diapers, we've been raised as siblings. 2. Whoever said that I said they haven't been dating more than a year, that comment clearly says, my parents. 3. I apologized and got called an expletive, so whatever at this point. Y'all are right. I'm an ass. Congrats. I'm gonna give my judgment anyway. Yes, it is very awkward. It is very weird to drag the dad into this one. If you guys have been raised since siblings, since you're in diapers, you've been raised as siblings. I find that very weird from the outside looking in to think that a romantic relationship was struck between two people that have been raised together their whole life. Yes, they may not genetically be involved because it's two sides of different coins. They just happen to be related to OP, they're siblings to them, but yeah, there isn't anything there. Really depends where you stand on this one. Because obviously to you, it's really weird. And to me, that would be absolutely weird. So, I don't judge you for saying it. A lot of people would and can judge you for it. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions. I probably would make the same joke if I was OP. I would probably ask the same questions because if I put myself in those shoes, oh my god. That's weird. So yeah, morally, probably the wrong thing to do, but I don't think you're an a-hole. I think this is so odd. Not the a-hole. I think they're overreacting. Now in the comments, Tweaky Wolf says, "You're the a-hole. They are not related to each other. They just happen to both be related to you. You're allowed to feel weird, but you keep that to yourself because, while it's an odd occurrence, calling it indirect incest is taking it too far. I hate the way everyone here has taken the whole blood is everything route. Does that mean I can marry the sister I grew up with because I'm adopted? Can I marry my birth father? After all, I'm legally not related to him. Of course not. That's weird. Like it or not, if you grow up with someone, you're a sibling, and I would call it incest with no hesitation." Striped Badger says, "Yes, you're the a-hole. I'd say inadvertently, but you're old enough to know better. You're allowed to find it weird, but you do know who to talk to about finding it weird though. Literally anyone else that's trustworthy except the couple. Their relationship is not open to your judgment. It is their relationship with each other, not their relationship with you. Dump your awkwardness out, not in." Sashimi 1300 says, "Not the a-hole. It's frickin' weird, full stop." What's super weird are all the responses here telling OP it's not about you, not the a-hole. All OP did was acknowledge the elephant in the room. Then everyone got all butthurt because they couldn't ignore it anymore. But if this were my family, I'd find it weird if no one ever mentioned how weird the situation is. This doesn't mean OP isn't supportive or doesn't think they should get married, it just means that she's the only one being honest about how weird this makes her feel. Unlike everyone else pretending this kind of thing happens every day. It doesn't. And guess what? Other people will find it weird too. Better get used to it. Not the a-hole. And OP just reiterates with their own comment down here, "Yes, we were all raised together. It was just my sister and I under the same roof, but the three of us grew up practically inseparable." Bringing this up because someone tried to say we weren't raised together. But you weren't raised together. You grew up together. You didn't live at his house and he didn't live at yours. He was a friend who happened to be related to you and you alone. But I doubt your parents at your house disciplined him the same way as they did you and your sister because they weren't his parents. They couldn't ground him or punish him, same as his parents couldn't punish your sister. He went home to his room at his house and didn't have a room at yours. Your families got together on holidays, but your parents didn't have to get him gifts for Christmas, same as his parents didn't have to go all out with the gifts for your sister. It's nice that your parents got along so well after separating that you three could grow up so close, but that doesn't change the fact that he's not your sister's brother. They could have grown up just as close without you, and no one would bat an eye at this marriage. I think they would, buddy, I'm sorry. It's only weird because you're making it weird that it's weird. And OP replies, "It's really funny that you read this 2-paragraph scenario and suddenly know exactly how we were raised, because 95% of what you said is completely untrue. The only accurate thing you mentioned is that my brother didn't have a room at my mum's house, probably because we lived in a 2-bedroom home and one was reserved for my mum. But congrats on being so financially well off that all of your siblings got their own room, I guess. You're the a-hole. Just go to therapy instead of arguing with strangers whose judgment you requested." Oh my god. Not the a-hole. That is weird. What is up with this comment section? Yeah, I'm surprised. Right now, OP's perspective is, my little brother and little sister are getting married to each other. It's really freaking weird. I mean, there are no issues with genetics because they're both half-siblings, but they're still my younger siblings. We grew up with each other and were raised as siblings. It's pretty weird, right? The real world says yeah. I can see why that would be weird for you. Comments here, it's totally fine. You need therapy for saying out loud that it's weird, you jerk. Honestly, I think OP's siblings will need to develop a sense of humor about it, because surely it's gonna come up again, and again, and again. What do you guys reckon? Sorry I got so heated with this one, I just think this is ridiculous, this situation. Our next post is by user StreetMitch, titled, "Am I the a-hole for changing my mind about food I was trying to give to a homeless person?" So in my area, there are tons of homeless people. I went to my local taco truck to get some food, and as I pulled up, there was a homeless person asking the cashier what's the most amount of food he could get for $1. They go back and forth, and he settles on a bag of chips and some salsa. When he was done, it was my turn to order. I told him I'd get him a burrito, which is about $10. I give the cashier my order, and everything seems cool. As soon as I walk away from the window, the homeless guy goes up to the window and tries to cancel his burrito and get the cash back. I stop him and say, "You don't want the burrito?" To which he replies he would rather have the money. I'm pretty annoyed at this point and tell him that's not how it works. So I cancel his burrito and put the cash in my pocket. Normally, I don't give money to homeless people, but I don't mind buying them food from time to time. So this just rubbed me the wrong way. He got mad and sort of begged me to change my mind. I refused, and he kept yelling and calling me an asshole while walking away. After he left, other people waiting for their food said that I should have just given him the money. I don't think I was in the wrong. He was just ungrateful for what I was trying to give him and only wanted cash, so he got nothing instead. TLDR, tried to buy a homeless guy a burrito. After I ordered it, he tried to cancel it to get cash. I told him he can't do that and canceled the burrito, and I took the cash. Am I the a-hole here? Should I have just given him the cash? Yeah, look, I'm gonna sit on the fence on this one and say I'm not gonna call him an a-hole for what he's doing because man's just trying to survive out on the streets. I'm not gonna say you're particularly an a-hole because you can do what you want with your cash. I do feel like it was a little bit heartless what you're doing there. And to each their own, maybe it was easier, maybe it was morally better that you let this one go and let him have the $10. This is a hard judgment to make, and I don't really have much else to add to this, so I'm just going to sit on the fence and say, no a-holes here. Now in the comments, Belderan60 says, no a-holes here. I have a hard time calling someone who is homeless an a-hole, especially with how there's huge prevalence of commodities with the transient populations of mental health and addictions. His actions for sure are in the a-hole direction, but desperation does intense things to a person. You were completely in your right to act how you did. If you wanted to give him money, you would have in the first place. He didn't want the meal you offered, so you cancelled it. If those people truly thought you were the a-hole, they were more than welcome to hand him $10 of their own cash. And OP replies, I agree I wouldn't call him an a-hole. I understand that cash could have done him better in the long run, but cash isn't what I was offering him, and he agreed to the food before I ordered it. I understand that most homeless people are not in that situation from their own doing. I think our society needs to vastly improve how we treat and help homeless people, and hope that reform comes soon. I was simply trying to feed someone who appeared to be hungry, and he essentially turned that down. I get why you're upset, but I also get why the homeless guy went for the money. $10 is a lot of money for a homeless person. It could feed them for 3 or 4 days. Plus, his system probably couldn't handle the burrito. Too much meat, too many spices, too much food at once. So essentially, what you offered him was food that might make him sick for the rest of the day, that he had no way to store for a few hours so that he could eat it in manageable portions. If you had let him have the money, he might have ordered something smaller that he could safely eat and saved the rest for later. Or, he might have taken the money down the street and bought 10 cans of beans. You can't do ramen when you're homeless. No water to add, no way to heat it. Or he might have blown the whole $10 on booze and drugs. Who knows? Edit to add, there's a reason why people who feed the homeless hand out things like bologna sandwiches. Portable, won't spoil quickly, doesn't need to be heated, and their bodies can handle it. As tempting as it is to buy a guy a nice juicy steak, go for fruits and veggies, eggs and cheese, not the red meat. Go for the pre-packaged stuff. Chips, not fries. Bottled drink with a reclosable lid, not the fountain drink. No a-holes here. While it was a nice gesture, you gotta realize that $10 can buy him a couple sandwiches from a fast food place and a jug of water and juice, while leaving enough for him to grab some chips the next day versus a single burrito. And OP replies, for sure, and I realize that. But there's a difference between saying, hey, can I just get the cash, it'll last longer, versus accepting a burrito, then trying to return it 30 seconds later to get cash. For sure. But as a homeless dude, he may have expected you to say no, and he ended up with nothing, which is what happened anyway. Our next post is by user AmITheA Pads, titled, Am I the a-hole for not paying my uncle back? So my parents and I are visiting my uncle and my cousins. My parents told me that whatever I forget to bring, I will have to pay for myself. My period started 2 weeks early on the first day here, and my parents said they were too tired to take me to buy pads and tampons. I asked my uncle to drive me to Target and told him that I forgot a couple things. He said okay, and then drove me. I bled onto the seat in my uncle's car, and my uncle figured out why we were there pretty quick. He bought me pads, tampons, chocolate, chips, a heat pad, and he took me to Starbucks. I tried to pay, but he wouldn't let me. When we got back to his house and my parents saw that I had a lot of stuff, they asked me how I was able to pay for it all, as I lost my job in January and haven't found a new one since. I told them my uncle paid for it, and they started yelling at me about how I went behind their backs and broke their rule. My uncle told me to go to my room. I'm gonna live here during the school year because there's this really good private school by his house, and he's offering to pay my tuition so I have my own room here, and that he will handle my parents. He says that I didn't do anything wrong, but my parents are still really mad at me, so I wanted to know if I was the a-hole. You're literally 14 years old in this situation, and you don't have a job. I don't get how they know this uncle, it's one of these two parents' brothers, and they're mad at him for that, and then they're mad at you for that. I'm also guessing that part of the reason you're moving out from them and in with your uncle is probably to get away from them. They sound abusive, because only abusive people that don't have their kid's best intentions in mind would do this to their kid. It's a perfectly reasonable thing for him to do. They know this brother, this uncle, best. There is literally no reason for them to be going off like they are. It just sounds like abusive tendencies. And if that's the case, I'm very sorry, OP. You are not the a-hole for accepting his generosity. He is an angel. Your parents suck. Not the a-hole. Now in the comments, melmel0319 says, not the a-hole. You're only 14, and you had a situation at hand that was completely out of your control. You obviously needed stuff for your period, and your uncle was being nice and helped. Plus, you offered to pay, and he didn't allow it. It's not like you went out of your way to add things that weren't a necessity. And OP replies, well, he got me chocolate and chips and a heat pad, and those aren't necessities, but he asked me if I wanted them. It was his choice to get you those things. No, they aren't necessities, but your uncle was just being a good dude and wanted to take care of you. I was gonna say that it was his choice, so her parents need to butt out of it. I feel like OP feels guilty about letting people treat her because of her parents probably getting mad at her. But can I also just say, bravo to the uncle for his compassion and understanding compared to her parents. Her uncle didn't get mad at her for bleeding onto his car seat. OP, don't let your parents find out, they probably would lose more of their crap if you did. Bought necessities plus comfort items and wouldn't let OP pay. Probably understanding her job situation as well as period struggles from having his own daughter. Understanding period problems to the point that he knew what to buy, good for a dad of a daughter or men in general to know. He handled OP's parents so they wouldn't yell at her unnecessarily. He stepped up to drive her to get a necessity when her parents refused and is letting her stay there and paying for her tuition. This man is a freaking legend. Not the a-hole. Let's go through a checklist. 1. It's a gift. Check. 2. You offered to pay yourself, but you were told not to. Check. And 3. Your uncle didn't ask you to repay him. Check. Sounds as if you're not obliged to me. And not the a-hole. Your uncle sounds like a solid guy, but your parents sound terrible. I can't imagine parents who would put their teenage daughter through something like this. Yeah, I mean, he's her uncle. She's his teenage niece who had an embarrassing issue, which he handled supremely well. Cool guy. And then her frickin' parents flip their crap because she didn't pay for her own basic sanitation necessities at 14 years old? Hell no to that. Would I be the a-hole if I turned in a group of doctors that initially refused to treat me for a life-threatening illness because they refused to believe that it was possible for me to have it? Okay, so for context, I'm a disabled military vet from my time spent overseas. I'm a 36-year-old female. I rely on the treatment from the VA systems for my healthcare, which, in my personal experiences, has always been wonderful in my area. A few weeks ago, I was rushed to the ER with what was the worst head pain I had ever felt, and it had come on in an instant. My CT scan ended up being clear, and it was diagnosed as a migraine. The next day is when hell started for me. Enter 2 weeks of near constant agonizing pain, a severely swollen left temple, bad jaw pain, my vision in my left eye was getting worse and I was seeing double, and there were other symptoms stacked on top of those. I had been requesting to be seen immediately by my GP. I have most of these requests backed up in emails, and I was blown off. I had a strong hunch at what was wrong with me, even though, according to the wise Dr. Google, I'm not supposed to get temporal arteritis until at least age 50. I just wanted to be taken seriously because I know my body. I feel I have a good grasp on my personal pain levels because of injuries I suffered in the military, and this was the worst pain I have ever experienced by leaps and bounds, and it never relented. Finally, my GP saw me and instantly changed her tune. To start treatment, I was to get a biopsy on my left temporal artery. The ENT doctor called me to set that appointment up. Only he wouldn't. He told me I had an actual 0% chance of having this, and I was wasting mine and their time if I came in because I was too young. He made it clear that he was not entertaining the idea of seeing me at all, and ended the phone call. It took another 24 hours of fights, emails, and phone calls, and being treated like crap to get the biopsy set up for the following morning. Hey, guess what? I frickin' have it. I'm being treated for it, but I've suffered permanent vision loss in my left eye because of the delay in treatment. Let alone what else, because I haven't even been fully informed on the extent of the disease yet. I want accountability. I want this drastic mistake to be learned from, and other people not to suffer my same type of treatment. Only people around me are telling me my anger is too much, that I would be the a-hole if I went after doctors' careers. Really? So I'm looking for judgment so I can make sense of this all and make a decision. And, oh yeah, I would have died as a result of this remaining untreated, and it could have happened at any time. So that's what people are basing their opinion on. You didn't die, they ended up saving your life, it could have been worse. Thoughts? Look, OP, just to tell it straight, if the people around you that know you best, that are most intimate with your life, are saying that you're being crazy, and that, it wasn't so bad, you didn't die, they did save your life after all, you really do have to question, whether friend or family, if these people are worth keeping around in your life. And that's not me saying cut them off instantly, that's me saying look back on what they've said to you and their actions towards you before, during, and after all of this, review that, and decide, if their actions are like that of a gallbladder. It's nice to have in there, it's not completely necessary, and if it's infectious and it's going to kill the rest of your organs, maybe it's time to take it out. Just some food for thought on that one. I'm gonna have to say not the a-hole for this one. You've been done dirty by everyone, and it's not your fault. You fought for yourself, and I love that. Not the a-hole. Now in the comments, Natural Sneak says, not the a-hole. Seriously, Doctors need to stop acting like females don't know what they're talking about. You know your body, and you knew something was wrong. And edit, because many of you have come at me, I'm not gatekeeping this. Yes, I'm aware it happens to males. Again, historically, doctors ignore women. Stop coming at me. Tell everyone who is telling you your anger is too much, and that you would be the a-hole if you went after doctors' careers, that they can F off. They are not the one who lost an eye. Your anger is justified, and these kind of doctors should not be in medical professions if they can't do their jobs properly. Yeah, and they only saved your life because it was their frickin' fault you were in a position to need saving to begin with. That you wouldn't have been in as much danger if you had been diagnosed promptly. She saved her own life. Seriously. Not the a-hole. Report them, make noise, hold them accountable. You're extremely lucky to have come out of this alive, but the next person may not be. I'm really sorry this happened to you. I'm glad you caught it and made them listen, and I hope the treatment is as effective and painless as possible. Best wishes for your recovery. Our next post is by user Am I the A-hole Mum Issues, titled Am I the A-hole for not leaving my mum alone with my daughter? So I, 27 female, have a 5-year-old daughter with my husband, 28 male. I am the pastiest white possible. 3rd gen NZ Irish, I'm guessing that's New Zealand, but I'm not sure. And so light that I basically glow in the dark. My hubby is African American. Our daughter has taken after him both in skin color and hair type, and this has been a huge learning curve for me since my hair has always been straight as a ruler. My mum is an ex-hairdresser, semi-retired due to carpal tunnel syndrome. She has no experience with African American hair and no desire to learn, as I've tried. Up until 6 months ago, she regularly babysat for us when we needed a break, and we've never had any issues. Then, the day before my daughter was supposed to start school, my mom was going to look after her for a couple of hours while we went on a date. We were called halfway through dinner by my mum freaking out, and our daughter crying hysterically. Mum had tried to straighten her hair so she could fit in at school the next day, but whilst struggling to put a comb through my daughter's hair, she had burnt her scalp twice with the iron and had to have the iron on such a high setting that she melted a section of her hair. I was absolutely beside myself with her, partly because she had actually hurt my daughter, but also because I don't want my daughter to think that she has to look a certain way to fit in at school. I told her that night that she would never be allowed to babysit unsupervised again. Now 6 months later, and she's nagging me to give her another chance, but I really don't want to. She was like this my entire childhood. Made me start getting spray tans and styling my hair when I was 12, so I'd be a cool girl. And she restricted what sports I could play in case I got hurt and ended up ugly. I thought she would be different as a grandmother, but now I think it's just more of the same. Am I the a-hole here? And should I give her another chance? OP has offered the following explanation for why they think they might be the a-hole. I think I might be the a-hole because I'm basing my stance off of one incident and letting my childhood affect my parenting. No, she literally burnt the scalp of a child twice and then melted that child's hair. If she wanted to do this with your child's hair, she would have learnt and taken precautions beforehand. She refused to do that, yet she tries to dive into the deep end with this one. That hair is notoriously difficult to work with. That's the reason they have salons set up specifically for these hair types. She knows this. She should know better, and she does know better. She did this without telling you, it was malicious, and she called you after the damage was done. At least she had the balls to call you and tell you that she messed up. Thank you, mother, for not continuing to do more harm. You still are an a-hole. I 100% don't blame you for keeping her away from your daughter if it's just one-on-one. She's already screwed up this one time, it doesn't matter, it can and probably will happen again if given the chance. It's always great to follow that saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. Do not shame yourself in this instance, OP, keep her away, not the a-hole. Now in the comments, Uncle Dad 87 says, not the a-hole. If it were me, I wouldn't give her another chance either. Your priority is to protect your child, and no one should be making her feel like she needs to change things about herself to fit in, especially not a family member who she trusts. I think you made the right decision, and you're doing what's best for your daughter. And please don't let her babysit alone again. She hurt your daughter by doing something stupid. OMFG, I would be so damn angry, not the a-hole. She hurt her granddaughter by being racist. She wanted to straighten her granddaughter's hair so she'll be palatable for white society. Yeah, that was a huge a-hole move. She should never be alone with her granddaughter, ever. I'm not usually one to scream racist at the smallest offense, but man, that's some solid racism right there. Yeah, being an experienced hairstylist and having no desire to learn how to cut and style African American hair is what made me immediately blame racism. In addition to the obvious racism, it sounds like she also has a fairly healthy dose of misogyny, ableism, and general ugliness baked into her crappy worldview, based on OP's description of her childhood. I feel like this goes beyond supervision and should maybe be a catalyst for OP to re-examine her whole relationship with her mother. Also, how does OP's husband feel about all of this? Dividiticular says, very strong not the a-hole. I'm sorry, but your mother is blatantly prejudiced and a huge a-hole. No one should be told they have to change their hair texture, skin tone, or limit their activities to be beautiful, much less a child. I am so sorry she put you through what she did, and that she's trying the same thing with your girl. That is straight up abuse. Look, I wholeheartedly agree. OP's mother is an abusive bigot. Telling that to anyone, let alone children, huge not the a-hole, and deserves no second chance. And our big daddy, Greek American Dom, comes through and says, not the a-hole. Has your mother even apologized? A real apology. One that acknowledges the racist roots of what she tried to do, along with the harm her ignorance caused your daughter. If she comes to you, she has to admit that what she did was wrong with a detailed explanation of what exactly she did wrong. Explains what she will have to do to have it never happen again. For example, she will never try to make your daughter fit in, she will learn hair care appropriate of your daughter's hair, etc., and says sorry to you and your daughter. You do not give her a second chance. Our next post is by user Am I the A-hole nipple nurse? Titled, Would I be the a-hole for going to HR about my secret nickname? Throw away because I don't want to be identified. Long story short, I'm a nurse at a hospital, and I go to different floors as my job to help out. I have a pretty common name. Think Jessica, Amanda. There are several nurses with my name throughout the hospital, and sometimes multiple on the same floor. Today I was working on a hall with a new nurse who didn't know me yet. She commented on how it was weird that this floor had 3 Jessicas on it. She asked me which one I was. I guess she thought I worked just on that floor, and I told her my last name. Then she asked if I knew Jessica with the nipples that works on float pool. The charge nurse was nearby, and I noticed her eyes get kinda big, and she looked nervous all of a sudden. I was confused for a minute because I'd never heard this description, and as far as I knew, I was the only Jessica in float pool. It dawned on me that she was referring to me without knowing I am apparently Jessica with the nipples. I guess this was just a known thing about me, 'cause that nurse avoided me like the plague all day, and so did everyone else. The charge nurse tried to make it into a joke with me at lunch, and I laughed to hide my embarrassment, but I am mortified. I had noticed my nipples sparingly in the bathroom mirror and thought that it was just a rare thing when cold. I guess my nipples show through my sports bra and scrubs on a regular enough basis that it becomes my secret identifier. I told a friend that I was thinking about going to HR about this, but they said that it was obviously a harmless identifier that I was never supposed to find out about, so it should have been no harm, no foul. The same as Jessica with red hair, etc. I feel like it's not harmless though to use an identifier that is so embarrassing and made me the butt of jokes. I think I could be the a-hole because I don't know what HR would do, and what if it's too extreme? I don't want anyone fired. Edit to add to. Not sure if Reddit gives you a notification about updates to posts you comment on, but here's what I've decided since I posted this. First, much to my shame, I'm a very non-confrontational person, so I did not confront anyone. And due to this, I also decided not to go to HR, despite the overwhelming response telling me to here. After thinking about it for a day, I decided there wasn't much that HR would be able to do without just causing me further embarrassment and making the whole workplace awkward. I came home to some new bras my hubby bought me that fit all the criteria I wanted for bras, but I just hadn't looked very hard previously. He got me a size up from what I already had, and they turned out even more comfortable. I'm currently not talking to my friend I'd mentioned because he was really insensitive, and even brought up a time from our teen years where someone untied my top in the lake and everyone got a great look at my pepperoni nipples when I came out of the water. I also put in some new applications to local places for a new job, and I hope to be leaving this place soon. Thank you for all the input. Sorry I couldn't respond much between work and family once I got home. And Opie offered the following reason for why they think they would be the a-hole. I think I could be the a-hole because I don't know how HR will respond, and what if it's too extreme? I don't want anyone fired. I'm sorry I read the update there and it kind of spoils it in a way, but I don't think that even if you had gone to HR, it would be an a-hole move. That's such a disgusting nickname to give people. I understand in office environments and everything else, people say worse, and people keep really bad stuff under wraps. That's just how things are sometimes. It's not acceptable, but it's a reality of life. People talk, people gossip, and it's not good. I know I've defended gossiping in the past. It's a bit of a grey area, I'll admit. In this case, it wasn't a force for good, that's for sure. This does come across as harassment by seemingly everyone that you work with because everyone was avoiding you. It was that widespread, Jesus Christ. So really, I don't blame you for wanting to leave that place. I don't think even taking it to HR would have solved anything here. You were doing good, you've kept your temper, and you've carried on, and I applaud you for that. Not the a-hole. Now in the comments, Snarfblatt in concert says, not the a-hole. The nickname is unprofessional and sets a bad precedent for the culture. In fact, it seems like you have two informal nicknames, and yet some people chose to use the borderline harassment one when float pool is enough to identify you alone. Also, they really can't go by first name plus last name initial? What the hell? Right? Or even last name. I work with lots of Mikes. We just call them by either last name or first initial plus last name if it's easy to say. I would feel so gross to be called Jessica with the nipples, even if that was the most recognizable thing on me. We avoid issuing last names as nurses, going so far as to keep them off our badges because we get stalked by patients and family members. That makes sense under normal circumstances, but I'm almost certain that the Jessica in question would rather go by Jessica last name or Jessica initial over Jessica with the nipples. Not the a-hole. Harmless my ass. That's sexual harassment and just a nasty nickname. Right? She's the only Jessica in the float pool. She could have just been Jessica in the float pool if they couldn't bother to do last name and initials. And I highly doubt that she's the only Jessica with nipples. Our next post is by user LADuck22, titled, Am I the a-hole for wanting to split up Airbnb costs by person as the only single person on a couple's trip? So I'm planning a trip with my friends and their wives, 7 people total, including me. We're getting 4 bedrooms, 3 couples have their own rooms, and I have mine. Just as we're about to book, 2 people brought up how it would be unfair if we split up the total cost of the Airbnb evenly 7 ways because couples act as a unified body. They want to split the cost 4 ways and make me pay for 2 people, $600 versus $300, while the couples pay $300 total for their rooms. If the couples just split it 7 ways, they'd have to pay $77 more per couple. Why should I have to pay more just because I'm single? The couples will be taking up more rooms in the house, more of their food will be in the fridge, they'll have more stuff in the bathroom. And if the shoe was on the other foot, I'd 100% split by person. Or am I crazy? OP has offered the following explanation for why they think they might be the a-hole. I might be the a-hole because I don't want to pay the full cost of a trip. I just don't want to get screwed on the cost of a trip between friends because I'm the only single person on a couple's trip. I should have made clear my intentions earlier and not just assumed people shared my viewpoint. Alright, I initially went for everyone sucks here for this one, but I saw more context in the comments and I think OP is not the a-hole for this one. If they really want you along for this trip, they should be happy with splitting it 7 ways. It feels like they're kind of forcing this on you at the last minute. You assumed one thing, they assumed another. I don't think it's fair that they use their power as 6v1 to force this on you. What I'm guessing from the get-go, they probably all assumed it would be an even split between everyone. So for that reason, I don't blame you for not wanting to pay the full cost of the trip, split 4 ways. That's a bit weird to me. I'm gonna go with not the a-hole. I feel like you've been done dirty here. Now in the comments, Beans and Rice says, I'm so confused by all of the you're the a-holes here. For big group holidays where we've hired Airbnbs for our friend group, we've always split by person. Allocating by bedroom seems insane to me. This isn't a hotel, it's a house. Split the cost like a rental if you must. Allocate a cost per bedroom, by square footage, available amenities, quality of room, etc. Split that cost by couple and the OP, and then calculate the cost for use of the rest of the house, living room, kitchen, bathrooms, and split that by the number of people. But no way OP should be paying for 1/4 of the accommodations costs on their own, not the a-hole. Did anyone else's brain go into a scrambled mess listening to that? Jesus Christ. J Brood replies, with you on your own confusion why people would think OP is the a-hole, assuming they don't have much group travel experience, I guess. Most of them don't really seem to grasp the difference between an Airbnb and a hotel, for frick's sake. You have at least a sensible idea in theory, but the problem is getting 7 people to agree on what each bedroom and such is worth. In practice, however, I've seen this just lead to fights over the absolute dumbest crap imaginable, like who used what bathroom, for real. Or it turns out, one of the beds in the nice looking room is actually uncomfortable as hell, and they want to change the valuation. Or one couple likes the hole up in their room and wants a discount on the shared space. In my opinion, happy travel is all about minimizing potential stresses ahead of time. By far the easiest and most equitable way is just to split it per person. Miss D. Reed says, everyone sucks here. I think an equitable way to fix this is by how much time you spend in the room versus in the house. With the fact you won't be spending all of your time inside, I would say it would be fair to do a split, 1/4 for the bedroom and 1/7 for the whole house. It looks like the total for the Airbnb is $2,400? So take 1,200 and divide it by 4, nighttime/own room equals 300, and then the daytime of the 1,200 and divide it by 7 is 172. You'll pay 472 and the couples will pay 644. I honestly think it's very fair. It's definitely not fair for you to pay half of what they pay when you have your own room, but it's also not fair for you to pay 1/4 of the day use of the whole home when there will be 7 people using the bathrooms and kitchen and crap like that. My god. This is the most bizarre and needlessly complex thing I've ever read. I do not understand on what planet you think this is reasonable or how you came to these insane calculations. Truly odd. I can see, after all of this, why people get into so many arguments about it, because there's so many ways you can cut this pie to make it equitable for someone and not someone else. Oh, this is just frustrating, isn't it? Euro103 asks, info. Are they strapped for cash? And are you sure they want you along on the trip? It might just be me, but if a bunch of my friends did this to me, it would feel as if it was a polite and subtle way of letting me know that I wasn't wanted on the trip, because I would probably be unable to afford an additional $300. And OP replies, they are not strapped for cash. I make the least of the 7 of us. I think they want me to be on the trip, but they all want time to do couple crap instead of potentially having me third wheeling. Yeah, you're not the a-hole. In my social circles, it's considered bad taste to ask the person earning the least to fork out more. If you consider them really good friends, you can just fork out the expense. If you can afford the difference, to keep the peace. Alternatively, invite someone else to split the cost, and also keep you company while others go do their couple stuff. And why are you going on this trip to begin with? Being the only single person on a couples trip would be a nightmare. Am I the a-hole for asking my significant other to take the baby with her when she leaves the room in the middle of the night? So I have to wake up at 5 to 6 a.m. every weekday for work. My significant other is a stay-at-home mother. Approximately once a night, she gets up at around 2 or 3 a.m. She hasn't actually gone to sleep yet, she's just watching TV and getting ready to go to sleep, to go to the restroom or to put clothes in the dryer, etc. Our 5-month-old baby immediately wakes up and starts screaming as soon as my significant other leaves the room. Most nights I spend 10 to 20 minutes woken up in the middle of the night trying to get our baby to stop crying, but she never does until my significant other comes back. I can't fall asleep easily, and I take 30 minutes to an hour to fall back asleep. I've asked her to take the baby with her and put her in her baby swing or something so that I don't wake up. My significant other says that she shouldn't have to do that and I should wake up. If the roles were reversed, I would do that for her. But she says that isn't the point, and you shouldn't mind having to wake up, and she should be able to do something without having to bring the baby with her. I told her that I think it's selfish to make me wake up just because I shouldn't mind waking up. When I'm not at work, I help take care of all of our children and will give her breaks from the baby. It's not that I'm lazy or don't want to be with my baby, but having to spend every workday tired just because I have to, in my opinion, wake up for no reason, just doesn't seem fair to me. Am I the a-hole? Edit, my other children are 7 and 5. Many have asked why she's doing the laundry in the middle of the night, and a lot of these times she starts a load of laundry and forgets to or delays putting it into the dryer, then when she wakes up in the middle of the night, she decides to do it then. Yes, I do help with laundry and cleaning and dishes. Why don't you sleep in a different room? My significant other doesn't like it when I sleep in a different room and gets angry. Why don't you wear earplugs? Great idea. I'm gonna try that. Also, my significant other is more nocturnal than me and doesn't sleep until 3 to 4 a.m. because she wakes up later in the day than I do. I do wake up with the baby and try to soothe her until my wife comes back. I don't refuse, and I just go back to sleep. I occasionally ask my wife why she won't take the baby to another room though. Edit, I'm going to discuss getting on similar sleep schedules with my wife and do more around the house. I'm gonna go for a bit of a spicy one and say not the a-hole, as this seems like a co-sleeping problem. It seems to be that the baby gets agitated and angry every time one of you leaves the bed, and that's probably a habit you need to start weaning them off of. It's obviously not the baby's fault, this is just a bad habit, and this bad habit has caused arguments and fights with you and your wife when it should be solved by slowly weaning the baby into a crib, into its own room. This doesn't have to end with you sleeping in a different room, it just means the baby has to sleep somewhere else and be comfortable with sleeping by itself. From your edits, it does seem like you guys both do your fair share of labor around the house. This is just one issue that's making you not able to sleep. And I'm sure that she's not able to sleep properly either in this one, and it's causing you guys to stress, freak out, as parents do. I don't think it's right to pit stay-at-home mothers against working parents. It's always a bit too hard since we're not in that situation. So I guess I don't know enough about you guys, and I'm just gonna go with no a-holes here instead of not the a-hole. Now in the comments, Cinderella Ridvan says, I'm going to risk the downvotes and say not the a-hole. You have a valid need for sleep in the wee hours of the morning, given your early work hours, and you don't seem to be shoving off all the work on your wife, contrary to how other commenters are reading the situation. It is, however, very uncool to let the baby wake your sleeping spouse if you're awake. That's weird and inconsiderate, and I would absolutely say the same thing if it was OP disturbing the baby while his wife was sleeping. It seems like the real problem here is your wife's midnight rising. What's going on with that? And why does her waking up wake the baby up? Do you bed share, or is she slamming the door and turning on the lights? I'm not sure it's reasonable for her to have to drag the baby along with her to the bathroom or just wherever. The need for solitude is powerful with a baby in the house. It would be better either to have her not going on midnight expeditions, or to have the baby be able to sleep through it. And OP replies, "We bed share, but after going through these comments and PMs, we've decided that it's time to wean the baby off of night feeding and have her start sleeping in her crib." R. Baltimore says, "My son's sleeping schedule got set in the NICU, so he was waking up every 2 hours to feed. Because he was bottle fed, my husband and I took turns every time he woke up so we could each get 4 straight hours of uninterrupted sleep. Even when my son's eating patterns widened, we still took turns with each waking. This is parenting, and it's especially important when you have a high needs and clingy baby, which it sounds like you do. And for God's sakes, do the laundry for her." And OP replies, "She doesn't exclusively do the laundry or anything else. We actually have agreements where I do certain things and she does others, but we both willingly overlap and do each other's chores as well." Shamanda says, "You're the a-hole. Ever think your wife needs sleep too and is tired? You both had children, and a baby and kids is a full-time job and a bloody hard one. I've done both working full-time and a full-time stay-at-home mother. I'll take the full-time job any day. These kids can be killers, lol. Maybe your child needs to develop a better bond with you to be happy, to soothe to you as well. I don't mean this with offense at all. A baby bonds to mum very tightly, or whoever is the primary caregiver of baby, whether it be mum or dad, or even nan and pop. My partner and I slowly worked with our daughter, 10 months, to have a greater attachment to him because she was so dependent on me after medical issues early in life, and me being the mum caregiver when he worked. It's hard, and you may have some sleepless and crappy nights, but it's worth it." And OP replies, "I don't take this offensively, and thank you for the advice." And Rhinoki says, "Not the a-hole. It's pretty rude of her to leave like that knowing the little one is going to wake up, and in turn, wake you up. I also have issues falling and staying asleep, and I recently bought a big jar of melatonin gummies, and not only do I fall asleep super fast, but I stay asleep all night. I highly recommend it." And OP replies, "I understand that she needs to relieve herself, so it's fine that she leaves. I'll look into melatonin though. I have a horrible time sleeping and staying awake, so if that's helpful, I'll try it." Our next post is by user NatAttack2015, titled, "Am I the a-hole for wanting to elope after my parents cut my wedding budget in half? I'm recently engaged and I've started planning my wedding. I'm the only girl and my parents make good money, about $450K yearly. So they've always said they'd pay for my wedding when I decide to get married. I set my budget around $25K and started getting estimates on venue, photographer, videographer, etc. My dad said the budget was $40K, which I knew I'd be way below, so I wouldn't have to stress about DIYing the whole thing and enjoy the planning process. My mum has consistently pushed me to cut corners and have a cheaper wedding, and she said she'd give me a few thousand as a gift if I do. Note, my mum is notorious for backtracking on promises when it comes to money. My fiancé and I agree we'd rather have a nice, put-together wedding than accept the gift. Might I restate, she backtracks on these decisions last minute too often for me to trust it. My mum has also gotten estimates of how much her friends paid for their daughters' weddings, all of which were over $25K, and agreed they could swing that financially. The kicker here is after those two estimates were thrown out, my parents backtracked and gave me a final wedding budget of $20K. My mum is also pushing me to use vendors that her friends used, instead of me finding people that fit my style. She wants a southern barn wedding, I like more modern elegance. I wouldn't be so upset with them had the budget been $20K from the beginning, but it seems as if they pulled that number out of thin air. They also created this budget after my mum spent $3,000 on my dress and veil, so I'm now left with $17K. Another issue I have is they have no problem buying baseball tickets for $200 a piece and spending $100 plus on dinner multiple nights a week. They also just bought one of my younger brothers a car. He's in his junior year of college. My fiancé and I are long distance and will be until we're married. And when I told my mum I'd rather elope than dance around a wedding budget and not be able to enjoy my day, she flipped. She's pretty much refusing to let me elope, and when I told her to plan the wedding herself because she's being so picky, she had a problem with that too. I feel as if there is no winning in this situation. Quite frankly, I just want to be married to the man that I love instead of arguing over wedding budget with my parents. Look, I'm on your side for this one. I don't care if it's controversial. She's being way too much. Your mum is obviously doing this all for attention. She loves the drama that she's causing. She loves that she continues to cut your budget down. That's very apparent through her actions. And then when you want to give her all responsibility for it, she doesn't want that either. She just wants attention. She doesn't want you to elope because then she doesn't get to continue the charade. I would say elope. Do it, don't look back, be happy. She's obviously got a history of screwing you over and backtracking on things that she promised or said she would do. There's no point wasting your time, especially with something like being married to your partner. There is just no point. I'm going with not the a-hole, please just elope. Now in the comments, the judgy witch says, everyone sucks here. Sorry, but you sound incredibly entitled, whinging about your parents only giving you $20,000 for a single-day event. That's an annual salary for some people. Your mum is being overly pushy, which I can imagine is really annoying. If she offered to pay for a wedding as a gift, then it should be yours to design. If you want to elope, then do it. Edit. Some people seem to be getting really annoyed with the judgment I've made. There is no denying the mum is an asshole for being so controlling and changing the budget, but I stand by my statement that OP sounds entitled, and that makes this a solid everyone sucks here for me, especially when they say they have an issue with parents spending $100 on a meal. And arbitrary Cherie replies, while I understand and agree that this insanely expensive wedding is a clear example of entitlement, OP is not the a-hole in this situation. OP's parents gave them an original budget, one that was $15,000 above what they were planning on using. Then, after planning begun, the parents went back on their word and cut the budget in half. It doesn't matter if the original budget was $40K or $4K. They still went back on a promise and are trying to control OP's wedding. Also, the fact that OP is perfectly fine just eloping rather than spending so much money on something they don't want proves not the a-hole even further. They'd be spending maybe $1,000 rather than thousands. Visible Piano replies, I agree with everyone sucks here in this case, because OP is complaining about the money they spend elsewhere, as if that has any bearing on whether they should give her $20,000 or $40,000. It's clear OP's motivation is to be spiteful and try to threaten the mum into behaving how she wants. It's a tricky one because it's OP's wedding, but it's the parents' money. So who gets a say in how it's done is up for negotiation. It could have been handled much better on both sides. I don't think it's to threaten the mum into behaving how OP wants, but more like to keep her to not be that pushy at all. After all, it's OP's wedding and not OP's mother's wedding. While I agree, as the ones giving her a budget, they have a bit to say about the cost of things, the ultimate decision should still be OP's to make. Like, why settle for a venue that OP doesn't like just to please the mum? Just from what OP described, it sounded like mum and dad were cutting the budget when OP didn't plan the details that mum and dad wanted. Mostly mum, though. She's not complaining so much as putting things into perspective. They have no problem blowing $1,000 to $2,000 a week, or spend that much on a car for one of her brothers, but they are balking at spending what is actually below average for an American wedding after having both agreed to a higher number and verifying that's what their peers have spent as comparison. Plus, mother is trying to dictate specifics when she's a known flake, and changing the deal after already spending money. This on top of not wanting the full budget and being willing to elope. Sorry, not the a-hole. I think OP is being quite reasonable here. Stoat King replies, she's pretty much refusing to let me elope. Lol, and how will she stop you? Not the a-hole at all. If you and your partner want to elope, then go for it. It's about the two of you and no one else. If other people are making the whole wedding thing into a nightmare of drama and bullcrap, then eloping sounds like a pretty good idea to me. She can stop you with guilt. How my mum stopped us from eloping was putting non-refundable deposits down for our wedding to vendors that she wanted without consulting us. It got so bad that most of the vendors did not even realize that it was my wedding. She would guilt my dad by saying this is what I always wanted. So my dad would fold and write the check, and then tell my now dear husband and I how if we eloped, how much money my dad would lose on those non-refundable deposits. You're a better person than me, OP, because I would have said damn that sucks and eloped anyway. Our next post is by user subsubsube, titled, Am I the a-hole for not wanting to help my pregnant cousin and her husband move to their new home? So my 21 male, cousin, 28 female, is currently 5 months pregnant with her first child. She and her husband currently live in an apartment, but will be moving into a larger home in a few weeks, as they're about to start a family of their own. My mother, 48 female, was speaking with my cousin earlier today. My cousin said she couldn't lift anything heavy because she's pregnant, and that her husband would need some help carrying heavier things, such as their dresser and bed. My mother volunteered me to help move their belongings into their new home. She didn't ask me if I would be okay, she just assumed I would be fine. Now don't get me wrong, my mother knew my schedule and made sure that there wouldn't be any time conflicts when I helped my cousin and her husband move, but it was bold of her to assume that I would be okay with helping them. To be honest, I'd much rather be at home and read, play some games, or learn something new online. I told my mother she should have asked me if I would have been okay helping my cousin move before confirming anything. I could have had some time to think about it. She told me to have some sympathy towards my cousin and help her out as she is pregnant. I told her I wasn't too keen on helping my cousin and her husband move. Now my mother is disappointed in me, and my father is too. Am I the a-hole? And would I be the a-hole if I don't give in and help my cousin and her husband? OP has offered the following explanation for why they think they might be the a-hole. My cousin is pregnant and can't move heavy things. Her husband can't carry heavy things like their bed and dresser alone. I might be the a-hole for making him have to look for someone else to help him and possibly pay a lot of money in doing so. I'm family and could technically help him for free. I guess this really depends on how much you value your family and helping them out with your physical service, because I'm sure there's a lot of families out there that would say, you suck for not just sucking it up and going to help out. It's just one day, that's all they need. But that's what we have moving companies for. That's what we have AirTasker for. We have a whole bunch of services that you don't need to volunteer someone else's time that doesn't want to do it, and you'll pay someone else. That seems perfectly reasonable to me. If I had a family member that was reluctant and didn't want to help me out, I wouldn't get pissed off and say they're an asshole for not wanting to help me move. Especially if they're in OP's position here. I wouldn't be like, what? Your mum volunteered you and you don't want to do it? God, you're a selfish prick, aren't you? Yeah, you're the scum of the earth, aren't you, cousin? Something like that. That seems like really irrational to me, but I can definitely see that being a real thing. I'm gonna go not the a-hole for this one. The mother should have asked OP before signing him up for this job. Seems kinda stupid to me, and I would hope that these two people are rational actors and won't get pissed off at you for it. Not the a-hole. Now in the comments, the judgy witch says, quote, now my mother is disappointed in me and my father is too. Not the a-hole. I'd be interested to know how much time your parents are volunteering to help them move in. I'm betting it's none, but they still get to feel like helpful people by offering up your free time. Yep, no one wants to be voluntold to do something they didn't sign up for. This kind of answer is so common on Reddit, and it makes sense because from a distance, sure, OP is an adult who technically doesn't have to do anything they don't want to. They would still be an a-hole, as part of life and common decency is helping your friends and family. If your only excuse is, I don't want to. Sure, the mum's kind of an asshole for volunteering them, but parents do that occasionally. From OP's age, they may not work full-time, and the parents might, so it might be easier for OP. And let's be honest, who would you rather have helping you move? A 48-year-old woman or a 21-year-old guy? Miniasaur replies, It's really easy to be decent when volunteering other people's time. Like I said, it'd be easy to say the mum's an a-hole too. That doesn't mean OP isn't an a-hole. He still just wants to sit on his ass playing video games rather than helping his cousin for an afternoon. So absolutely everyone related to this pregnant woman is an asshole because none of them have volunteered to help? Including OP's mother, who you said only was kinda the a-hole. Your morals are jacked. Kikita987 replies, honestly, everyone sucks here. I get that helping somebody move sucks, but you know what else sucks? Moving house alone because your friends and family are all busy or simply decide they don't want to. Granted, your mum definitely should have run it by you before that, and cousin should have confirmed that it was okay with you at the earliest next chance. But saying that you simply don't want to is also a little selfish. Keep in mind, you're allowed to be selfish, but be prepared for some backlash or tension down the line. By the way, cousin isn't wrong about the lifting. You can lift some things at that stage, but how heavy at any given stage varies depending on underlying conditions. She could be on light bed rest for all you know. 6 months preggo and can't lift more than 1 kilo. If I go grocery shopping alone, then we're having Cheetos for dinner. But even if you don't have a useless cervix like I do, at 5 months pregnant, the body is very out of balance and not a you need your chakras fixed in a cleansing smoothie way, but physically you are lopsided. It's late into second trimester, hip and back pain is common, the hormone relaxin makes you prone to twisting ankles, belly is getting larger, some can't see their feet. You've put on weight, and now the weight itself isn't the problem. The problem is that it's all in the bump, so you're front heavy. Then, in addition to that, most people struggle with sleep, exhaustion, etc. I'm also moving houses, so pretty much the same situation as OP's cousin. I agree with your assessment of everyone sucks here, except cousin and husband, who just asked if someone could help them move the big items, which is a fair question. I would, however, like to add that I sure as hell hope OP doesn't ever need any help with anything from his cousin. Because I know if I had an able-bodied relative who decided that they'd rather be gaming and watching YouTube than putting in 2 hours to help me do things I was physically unable to, then even 20 years later, I would not piss on them if they were on fire. OP isn't the only person in the world that can help them though. If his cousin and her husband need help, they can hire movers like everyone else. It's not OP's sole responsibility to help them. I think OP's mum is the a-hole for volunteering him without his consent, and the cousin and husband would be the a-hole for taking it out on OP. I don't know who everyone else is, but my family has moved houses 5 times, and never once hired movers. Well, not everybody has a family, and not everybody wants to go through the hassle of lifting. Am I the a-hole for telling my sister-in-law no one cares that she's pregnant? So I'm on mobile and my grammar will probably be bad because today I needed to get drunk. Backstory. My cousin, 33 female, who I'll call Mary, lost her husband, 32 male, and 2 of her 3 children, 3 female and 9 months male, in a car accident last week. Her and her daughter, 5, are, as you would expect. It's just heartbreaking. Well, today was the funeral, and my brother's wife, who was 26, announced her pregnancy the second they arrived at our house this morning. And we're like, okay, congratulations, but please keep it on the down low for today. Well, when we arrived at the church, she kept making gagging sounds and rubbing her stomach saying, I, as a mum, can't imagine what she's going through. They have no kids, so people would look at her and she'd tell them she was pregnant. Afterwards, at my aunt's house, my sister-in-law kept making everything about her, like say, someone's in the bathroom, sister-in-law would loudly say, pregnant lady needs to pee. She literally told my cousin's sister to give her seat so the lady with the baby could rest her feet. I ignored her until she came to me. Mary stuck out her flat belly and said to me, me and Isaac just found out I was pregnant, and honestly we're beside ourselves that it could happen to us. Mary broke down. I snapped like, who says that to a woman who literally just lost 2 babies? I said loudly to my sister-in-law, no one gives an F that you're pregnant. Look around. It's not just one, but 2 babies' funerals. Not to mention the love of Mary's life. Like, I knew you were an attention seeker, but for frick's sake, you took the test 4 days ago. Just leave. She did leave in tears, and my brother called me a fat, bitter tramp. I've gotten phone calls from my brother and sister-in-law's family calling me the world of names because I made a pregnant woman cry. If I'm being honest, even though Mary and my aunt thanked me because it was all making her upset, I feel worse about making a scene. Please put me in my place if I'm wrong. No, absolutely not. Their attitude is disgusting. She was more than deserving of a clapdown from you. Who the hell goes and drunkenly says that to a woman that's just lost her family? There's no universe where there's a justification for that behavior. I don't know what the hell everyone else is thinking by, backing her and not you. But they are definitely in the wrong. She is definitely in the wrong. You are not the a-hole in this one. Now in the comments, Thieving Willow says, "This is one of those where I read the title and went, I can't imagine how you could not be the a-hole, and then read the post and went, oh, not the a-hole. I'm not normally a scene-making person, but this is the kind of thing that making a scene is for. I am not normally one for publicly shaming someone, but this is what public shame is for. Sometimes someone's behavior is so far beyond the pale that the kindest and most righteous act for everyone else involved is to make a goddamn scene. Which you did. I'm so glad you were there to stand up for your cousin. Your poor cousin. Your poor cousin's daughter. Reading this made me feel absolutely sick for them. I'll be lighting a candle for them and the rest of your family today." And OP replies, "Please. She needs all the positive energy she can get. I only have negative energy for your sister-in-law, but I'm sending it as hard as I can at her, don't worry. I'm on board with that, but only good vibes for the baby, because that kid's gonna need all the luck with those people as parents. Yikes in advance." Ass Holier Than Thou says, "Not the a-hole. Things like that aren't things you regret saying. They're things you regret not saying." Oh god, yes. There are things that I regret having said in retrospect, but the things that haunt me are where I should have said something, and did not. I think that's enough comments on this one. It gets really dark, OP recounting the experiences down in the comments there. And I don't want to disrespect them, sharing their accounts of these incidents and what's going on with their cousin. Oh my god, I can't imagine going through that. I'm so sorry that these things happen and this has happened. My best wishes, OP. I hope you keep strong and your cousin is strong too. I really have no words. Our next post is by user Living Life 24/7, titled, "Am I the a-hole for allowing my daughter to miss a school deadline?" So my youngest daughter of 12 years old is nearly a teenager, and now more than ever, I feel that her attitude has taken a turn for the worst. Whenever I ask her to do something, she refuses or moans, or does it in a half-assed way that suggests she only did it to keep me quiet. She throws tantrums when she doesn't get her way, and gets angry and dismissive whenever somebody tries to correct her. I've tried to be understanding because as a woman, I'm aware of how overwhelming puberty can be. And the fact that she's growing up, however, that doesn't excuse her behavior these days. We, myself and my husband, allow her access to a computer. We weren't aware of how much of an addiction it could become for our daughter, and she's begun neglecting schoolwork to play video games instead. I've told my husband that we need to take the computer away, but he insists that it brings her joy, and she only has so much time to relax before the stresses of secondary school. The times where we have restricted her computer time, she makes excuses that it's important for her to use it for school. I didn't notice that she wasn't doing her homework because she'd rather play with her friends or use the computer until only a few months ago, and I began to supervise her doing her homework. I thought that had solved the problem and that she was starting to get all of her work done, only for me to find out that she's been lying about how much homework she gets and only does a portion of it in front of me. Today, she came home from school and I watched her do her homework. I checked her journal as well to make sure that she wasn't lying about the amount she needed to do. She finished her homework and I thought that it was alright. At 10 p.m, I was ready to tell her to go to bed, but I saw that she was working on a school project that she'd been given last week and how it's due tomorrow. She requested that I let her finish her project. I asked her why she hadn't done the project sooner or told me that she had a project to do earlier on, and she ignored me. It was already late, and I'm fed up of her not doing her homework, as we've had conversations about it several times, and her teacher has even called us about it. I told her I wouldn't let her finish her project and that she should have prioritized it before because it was late in the night already, and so I sent her to bed. She was visibly upset and told me that I ruin everything because now she'll be in trouble at school. My husband doesn't agree with my method, but I'm unsure of how to discipline her because she's getting older and she doesn't want to listen to anybody. Edit. My daughter ended up waking up very early this morning at around 6 a.m. to finish her project, and she completed it. She woke up by herself and took the initiative. The project isn't graded but would have an effect on her report card at the end of the school year. I would like to thank everyone for their feedback, and I'll take the ideas into account for situations in the future. Music Soccer says, honestly, you're the a-hole. Students will do things last minute. Students will spend the night finishing up a project, whether they're 10 or 25. 12 is the age where they want to stay up later, whether to watch TV, do homework, or practice something. This is a good time to teach her the consequences of being a procrastinator. In the morning, ask how tired she is. And after she gets her grade for the project, ask her if she's happy with the grade or if she thinks she could have done better. Then tell her, from my experience, saving important things like homework and projects for the last minute got me lower grades than I could have gotten. If she still doesn't change, then support her decisions. Not everyone is perfect. As someone who procrastinated until my 30s, if I decided to start the project the night before, that was on me. But I didn't learn my lesson on that until much later in life. Starting stuff last minute just enforced in my brain I didn't need to start any earlier because most of the times I got good enough grades, B's and C's to get by. I think a couple times of my parents saying to me that it's too late to start this project and telling me I had to go to bed would have curbed that behavior. Getting a 0 on something in middle school is one thing. I would hate to see it set up a pattern of the child always procrastinating. That will have much more dire consequences in their professional life. True, maybe it will work, but I've seen kids resent their parents from micromanaging them like OP is. I teach junior high, and each student is different. Doing one thing may be good for one student, but bad for another. For this girl, I think that she wants to be more independent, but hasn't learned responsibility yet. By asking these, "How would you feel about it?" questions may help her realize responsibility. Also, you have to realize that a 12-year-old brain isn't as experienced as a 30-year-old brain. I've talked to former students, and by the time they're 18, they're like, "Holy crap, I should have studied more when I was 12. This thread is a mix of answers because everyone sucks here. It is the parent's responsibility to set healthy boundaries in the household, but her current behavior and thought process is a direct consequence of your failed parenting with wishy-washy structures. 1. She throws tantrums at age 12 because that's the tactic that worked with you all throughout her childhood. 2. She resorts to coping mechanisms, video games, because she's bored after being able to get away with neglecting her personal responsibilities. If you taught her a healthy lifestyle with good study habits and a sense of individual responsibility, she would be busy prioritizing her healthy habits. 3. You could have limited the hours of video game usage instead of enabling her addiction. Using a computer is not either-or. It can also be when and for what purpose. And 4. You could have informed her earlier of your rule against doing projects late at night instead of magically enforcing it on a whim with an iron fist without her prior knowledge. And our next post is by user DoodleDoo23, titled, "Am I the a-hole for refusing to change airplane seats for a mother and baby?" So I'm pretty sure there's no way that I'm the a-hole, but I'm asking here because of the flight attendant's response. I had booked a window seat. A young couple, early 30s, and a small baby were located on the same row, and the mum with the baby was seated on the aisle, and the dad was sitting in my seat by the window. He asked if I'd trade seats for his wife. Assuming he meant my window seat for the aisle seat, I said sure, I'll sit in the aisle. He said no, you take the middle seat. I said absolutely not. There was no way that I was sitting in between the couple and next to a baby. They got super rude and frustrated, but the dad eventually moved out of the aisle seat and I sat down. The flight attendant stopped by shortly after and gave me a dirty look and said something to the couple like, "I can't believe that didn't work." She was really unfriendly for the rest of the trip. So was I the a-hole? Now in the comments, Grease Soil says, "Not the a-hole." What kind of idiot would think that you would want to sit between the two? What kind of idiot would want some random stranger sitting between him and his wife and baby? The idiot who doesn't want baby duty on a flight. Next question. What kind of idiot flight attendant would think that would work? I bet the flight attendant thought they were asking OP to switch for the aisle, not what they actually asked. I second that. There's no way she can think that's reasonable after X amount of flights with the exact same problem. To give the flight attendant the benefit of the doubt, I rate it as, "Oh my god, I can't believe that didn't work," directed at the couple with heavy sarcasm. Killian Ellis says, "Not the a-hole at all. The flight attendant seriously thought you would be willing to give up a specially booked window seat to sit in between two halves of a couple and their baby in the crappy middle seat. What the hell was she thinking?" This is so contrary to any reasonable expectation, I have to think the flight attendant misunderstood the situation or it was misrepresented. Our next post is by user Throwaway Wife Bully, titled, "Am I the a-hole for calling my wife a bully, knowing that it would trigger her?" For context, I, 36 male, work as a bus driver. I've been doing the same route for about 5 years, and have gotten to know my regulars pretty well, to the point where I'd consider most of us friends. I enjoy my job and conversation, and socializing comes easily to me. My wife, female 36, works in an office and drives, so she's never really met any of my regular passengers. So I've been married for about 5 years now, and we've got 2 little kids, male 4 and female 1, and every few weeks we do the big shop where we go to the big ASDA, Walmart for you Americans. Everything was fine, and we were getting through the list with the kids sat in the trolley when I hear my wife make a noise of disgust, and I look up to follow her gaze and see one of my regulars getting her own shopping done. Let's call her L, female 27. L is a goth. Very monochrome color scheme, always in black velvet and lace, black lipstick, powdered white face, some visible tats, the works. But she is a lovely girl, very sweet, works as a sign language interpreter at a local secondary school, is involved with age concern in her spare time, and is working towards a PhD. She's all around a nice young lady. My wife launches into a snarky tirade about her appearance. "Look at that. Why would you choose to look like that? Just asking for attention, then probably complains that she can't get a job. She looks like a witch. It's creepy. Wouldn't want that in any place of work. Probably on drugs, etc., etc." I told her to stop it, as she was being very rude and judgmental, but she kept going and saying increasingly worse things about Elle, not even turning down her vitriol in front of the kids. I'll be honest, I wasn't the best guy when I was younger, and if I'd seen Elle when I was in school, I probably would have made fun of her too, but we're all adults here, and I think it's time that we left that attitude behind us. Even if I didn't know Elle, I'd think that sort of talk inappropriate, especially as my oldest is very impressionable and due to start school in September, and I don't want him thinking that's an acceptable way to behave. My wife was bullied severely during her teenage years, and she's told me how much of an impact it has to this day. Eventually, I just told her to shut up and stop acting like the same bullies that made her life hell when she was in school. She shut up quick. She hasn't spoken to me since, and I got an angry text from my sister-in-law telling me I hurt my wife beyond words, and how dare I compare her to her school bullies, who traumatized her so badly as a teenager. I've tried explaining my side and how I want to set a good example for the kids, and also that Elle was a friend of mine, who gave us a congratulations card when we had both of our children. But neither one will listen, and I'm thinking I might have gone too far. It doesn't matter if she was traumatized by bullies in her school. If she doesn't want to be labeled a bully, she won't bully people. I know there are certain situations where it's like, you can't say that, but this is definitely one of them. Stop throwing stones in a glass house, OP's wife. No one cares, no one wants to hear it, you're just acting a fool and making yourself look stupid and rubbing off on your kid, who's just going to repeat that cycle of behavior. It is simply unacceptable. And good job to you, OP, for showing her just how disgusting her behavior is and shutting that down. She deserved it. You didn't deserve the backlash or your sister-in-law coming after you. Not the a-hole. Now in the comments, Vanishment says, not the a-hole. Honestly, I could write a bunch of paragraphs, but it seems to really just boil down to your wife not liking the fact that you held a mirror up to her personality and she wasn't prepared for the reflection. If she doesn't want to be called a bully, she shouldn't act like one as well. A lot of bullies are people who were bullied themselves. It's just that now they're in a position of power, they feel comfortable to prey on the weaker. I'm sure she didn't like that reflection, but that mirror might as well have been freshly Windexed because it was crystal clear. Hurting people hurts others. Not always. They can learn to be better, as OP has done, but if they don't acknowledge and choose to change, they become as bad as their abusers. And a lot of bullies are just bullies, enabled and allowed to be mean all their lives. What is OP's wife teaching her kids? If OP didn't call her out on it, he would be teaching them that it's just fine. OP is not the a-hole. As you're in the UK, you should remind your wife about the murder of Sophie Lancaster and ask her where she thinks the kids who did it learned that it was okay to judge people on how they look or dress. You're right to call her out on it because your kids are totally absorbing everything she says. It might be worth sitting down with the eldest and talking about how what mummy said was wrong and how bullying is bad. Not the a-hole. Piggybacking, I was going to mention this too. I was bullied severely when I was in high school, as I was a goth, and my mum was a complete mess as I was 17 when she was murdered, and she was worried. I'm 32 now. I have 13 piercings, several tattoos, and blue hair, and I've had a few dirty looks and comments of people like your wife, some when my children have been present. It doesn't bother me like it used to. I just tell my kids they don't know how to express their inner child. Isn't it more that they don't know how to express their inner adult? Children can be extremely cruel. We hope adults behave with kindness and compassion in a situation where a child would tease over differences. In my personal experience, I've found that adults are far worse than kids, and if things don't fit into their perfectly designed boxes, they throw a tantrum. The majority of kids are more versatile and curious with differences. I believe that the majority of behavior is learned, and if a kid is being an asshole, then the parents are more likely one too.